We're back with another PCBH Corner. I got myself, Dr. Bauman.
There we go. We'll keep going.
That's funny. We should make that into a clip.
We should. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep it part of the video. So it's not even going to be a...
Are you serious?
Oh, 100%.
All right. Anyway, I'm Dr. Beachy. I'm joined...
Could you imagine if you said it again? That would have been really funny. Sorry.
I'm joined by Dr. Bauman. We have an awesome... So we're not going to edit that out?
No.
All right. We're rolling with it. We have an awesome topic. It's one that we've touched on with other videos. I think maybe we're getting to that point where we definitely are recycling some stuff. But I think, talking about things in a slightly different way or an updated version, I think is a great thing.
And that's the thing, an updated version, right? Like we're iterating this where, we might have made a video like 5 years ago about something. It's like, oh yeah, that's probably changed since then. Or I hope it has changed since then.
I know every once in a while I'll watch those old videos and I'm like, hey, we were all right. We were pretty spot on. So today's topic is we're going to be talking about how to conjure up visits, get your productivity. I say constantly that every BHC is responsible for their own productivity. Well, what do I mean by that? And what kind of strategies can somebody do to be able to increase their productivity within an integrated care system? Well, I was going to say specifically PCBH, but I think some of these concepts absolutely can be generalizable to other settings. So that's where I was going to start you off with, is what can a BHC do? So say you're brand new and you're entering a system. Let's, for the sake of the video, imagine that the system is not like completely running smoothly, but it's also not brand new either. So they've had BHC, their EHRs are integrated, there's clinical space that's integrated, they've had BHCs before. You are now hired, you're entering that system. What can you do to make yourself productive?
The two things my mind goes first is more kind of high-end or high-level. I don't even know if that's the right thing.
High level would be,
High level works? Yeah, geez, man. Okay. The first one is to understand the why behind why we're saying to increase visits.
Okay.
And I think that's a really, really important point because there is no doubt in today's healthcare that there is this push of just, I really do, for probably some financial kind of gains that probably isn't the most value congruent behavior of like increasing visits and volumes that people are having. There's an underlying value though about why we're saying to increase visits and to increase productivity. And the main reason why is that we know, one, there's a lot of need out there related to behaviorally influenced concerns that show up in primary care that we as BHCs or behavioral health providers can help with. So there's a lot of people out there. And we know just in the general public is that behavioral health providers don't see a huge percent. And largely the reason why that is because of how we approach these different things. And we just have never really talked about the vast majority of the population that is left untreated. We just talk about the people that are treated.
Right.
So I think the one thing that we need to understand is like when we talk about high productivity, I think a lot of times people's relational frames can be related to finances, you got to burn people out. All those could be true. And the real reason why is because one, we think this stuff is life-saving. We think it's really, really important. And there's a need out there, and we just traditionally haven't met that need in a lot of different ways. And so one of the ways to do that is by increasing productivity and volume. So understanding the why for that.
And should you, if you're a BHC, is that something that like, what if you ask your one-up about it, your supervisor, and your supervisor never really talked to you about isn't stressing that. What if they're only stressing like, all right, so if we're going to put you in this clinic, you need to see at least 9 a day for us to like continue to have the program. And it's not necessarily talked about as the way you just described it.
Yeah.
Is that just something that they should?
I think my mind, it goes two different ways. One is remaining curious with that conversation because as much as we might not want to admit it, there's some truth to that conversation as well, that it's like for behavioral health to really kind of expand the way we want to, there has to be some reality of, we have to see visits to keep the lights on.
Okay.
There is a part of that. Now, the problem though is if that becomes the main value that's driving that, I think that's dead on arrival. I think that just isn't going to ripple out to a very productive thing. So one, having a realization is like, okay, there's probably some truth to that. The second thing that I would say then is like, this becomes part of the BHC really knowing themselves and what their mission is, what their value is. And if their supervisor isn't doing that, which I think most supervisors should, make sure that they're learning people's values and their whys, to do things themselves to make sure that they're adhering to what their values
so getting
and their
straight
are.
In their mind with and aligned with what they want to do. And it'd be great if you had a supervisor who was talking about these things, but I don't know if we can necessarily count on that. Okay.
We like the statement always, like, don't accept premises, right? Don't accept premises of the situation. Don't accept that premise that my supervisor isn't promoting a value that's true to me. Promote your own value that is true to you. Now, the other thing that I would say is what you said right at the beginning, is that the other high level kind of overarching thing is that, my mind says it sounds bad, but I don't think
here we go.
Is that understanding that most likely productivity is more on the BHC than anything else. So accepting the premise or not accepting the premise that productivity has nothing to do with my behavior. That I am in control of my productivity.
In the way you're saying that, I know why you're hesitant, because we did a video on about the blame game. You are saying it sounds like they take that responsibility because you believe a BHC has agency, not because you're trying to blame them or put excessive pressure and say, your productivity, that's on you. It's more like, look, you can go into a system that's really kind of a difficult system, and if you do specific behaviors, you can see a lot of patients and you can get your productivity up. But we're not saying this in a harsh way. I would say, is it a lack of will or a lack of skill? I'd say most of the time, folks maybe just don't have the skill set. They don't know. And that's what we're hoping to help with this video. So what are some of the things that a BHC can, like you're saying, can own?
So I'm going to get to that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got excited.
No, I love that. The reason why I wasn't going to jump in right because what you said excited me, I wanted to say, it goes back to that quote that we always said from The Godfather about not having success be based on luck. And not as a BHC, not allowing luck, such as like I have very engaged PCPs. We have a system that is going to really produce my productivity. Like I'm lucky to be in the system. So now I have high productivity versus like, man, my PCPs really aren't engaged. The system's not, so it's like now I'm unlucky, right?
Right.
I don't like either of those situations.
Okay.
I don't like either the lucky one or the unlucky one because that is totally based on external kind of things that are going on versus the BHC saying no matter what my luck is, good or bad,
I have agency.
That I'm going to do. So the thing that I would say, actually, it's amazing about how much we do just repeat ourselves with it. I think one thing that helps with productivity is taking a philosophy of single session, functional contextualism. I think that actually, pretty interestingly, ripples out to being able to see more people.
Okay.
Because if you think about that, or having more visits, is because you're only looking for moments right now, right? You're only looking for moments to have with patients. You can have a moment with anybody. You could have a moment passing someone on the street. You can have a moment in the grocery store. You can have a moment in 10 minutes in a clinical setting.
Right.
So if you understand and embrace that philosophy about a moment from the single session folk and the idea that functional contextualism, that we're really focusing on context, we're not really focusing on symptoms of pathology, and we're trying to really focus on helping people connect to their values and move towards their congruence. There's more flexibility within time, which also most likely is going to ripple out to having more visits.
Got it.
Because it makes sense to have more visits when I'm only focusing on moments or improvement of overall functioning.
To juxtapose that, if you're looking at that every single person you see needs a 12-session protocol so that we can treat all of their conditions, and we basically have to go from being like meeting diagnostic criteria to being in remission. That's versus finding a moment with somebody to help them get on their path. Those are two very different situations. I think that would in the way you're going to need 12 sessions, and they're going to need this, and they're going to need that. And we got to get them into remission. I think that you're putting just ridiculous amount of pressure on yourself. That'd be like a PCP saying that we have to get every single person who comes in with diabetes into being controlled via just like exercise and diet.
And what's interesting about it, I bet someone is watching this, they're like, well, wait a minute though. if you signed up a patient for 12 visits, wouldn't that increase your productivity overall? And actually, what my mind would say is that it probably opens you up to be unlucky. Because a lot of times, one, if it's in PCBH, most likely what's going to happen, we're going to refer that person out, right? Because it's like, oh, we don't do 12 visits in PCBH, right? Even though we made a video about that, why there's some misunderstanding there. So then you carry that ripple forward. It's like, well, if someone needs 12 visits of some evidence-based protocol, I'm going to refer them out. The PCP then is going to be like, why would I ever refer you someone again? So your visits are probably going to drop overall if you just keep referring these people out.
Triage and refer type.
Triage and refer will be the absolute tanking of someone's productivity for a variety of different reasons. So don't do triage and refer. Second thing though is, say for some reason, maybe it's like a 6-visit protocol or something like that. And you're like, you know what? I'm able to do that protocol in PCBH and I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Problem is that most likely that patient's only going to come to 1 or 2 visits.
Right.
So if you scheduled out 6 of these, so you have 6 visits on your schedule, but people start no-showing to these other things, that tanks your productivity because you're not looking at every interaction as this like one moment that can occur. And maybe you're not going to be willing to take handoffs because you know that patient's coming in at that time because of a lot of these scheduled visits. So it really does become somewhat nuanced within this. So taking a functional contextualist perspective as well as a single session approach, my mind says would actually ripple out to increasing people's productivity.
And this may make the video way longer than what we wanted. Can you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you give like a 30-second elevator speech about what single session, when you keep saying single session, what you mean, and then same thing with functional contextualists for the folks that maybe haven't seen our other videos or haven't done that work in those 2 arenas?
And if you haven't read anything about single session, look it up. There's a lot of different research about it. There's a lot of different movements. It just isn't talked about a lot. And for someone who might be more of a single session person, give me grace if I don't do a good job of explaining. What single session means to me is that you are solely focused on the moment that you're having with the individual. It is free of expectation about how many times this person's going to come back, how long is needed to work with this. It is solely based on what is occurring right now, right here, and we're going to work with this right now. That could be 10 minutes, that could be 25 minutes, that could be 45 minutes. That person might come back 5 times. But my thought was never in that first visit, this person's going to come back 5 times.
Right.
My thought was solely, I'm having a moment with someone right now that is free of expectation.
And that's why they call it a single session therapy, is not that it means you're only going to have 1 visit. It means that the therapeutic process happens in that one setting, or that one sitting, where that one session that they come in, it's like, okay, and we always call it 1 visit. In that 1 visit, this is a complete experience.
This is a complete experience. My treatment is wrapped up into this 1 visit.
Right. And now you might have them come back if it makes sense at the end for that to happen. And then when they come back, that's a complete experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And functional contextualism.
That, having the assumption, a simple but profound one, I think, having the assumption that every single thing that the person is presenting with makes sense within their context. And my goal is to, 1, understand why it makes sense and help them live more congruently with what is important to it. And that's the other kind of assumption within functional contextualism, that truth is only defined by a behavior's ability to accomplish a goal. So I want our behaviors that we're coming up with to accomplish the goal of living a value congruent life.
Okay. And there's a function to every behavior. And so even if somebody's they might be in a situation where it makes sense that they're doing a certain behavior, but that's taking them on a misaligned route for what they want to do in their life. And so you can assess that context, see what's maybe producing that, going the way that the path that they don't want to go on, engineer it, and then look at with the patient and say, oh, I see. Okay, that totally makes sense that when you're having anxiety, you're staying inside all day. But what you told me is you want a career and you want friends. So although it makes sense that staying inside quells your anxiety, we might have to practice doing a different behavior to maybe get a different outcome.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what's interesting about it is that as you were talking, you did such a good job of explaining this. My mind was going to, sometimes I think I get hit with feedback like I'm too philosophical, like we need to be more tangible, kind of pragmatic kind of things. But I think this is a really important one, because adopting those 2 approaches, they allow visits to be more flexible.
Okay.
Which then ripples out to more opportunities for things to occur. If things are rigid and really, really kind of like we hold on to it harshly, there's not a lot of room for it. So when we start to talk about conjuring up visits, if it's very restricted about how we approach a visit, if it's very like harsh and rigid and
like
stuff.
You have to start at this time, it has to be this amount, and then you have to have them back this many times. It doesn't really make sense to kind of like take a handoff in the moment.
Almost like the range of visits is going to always stick between like almost like 6 and 9 maybe, right? Like that's the only range that it's going to allow. But taking this approach as far as a single session and functional contextualism about what's going to happen in the visit, what I'm focusing on, allowing people to get to their values, I don't know. Like the range of visits, because of that inherent flexibility, starts to expand drastically. It's like, oh, I don't know, like 11, 12 visits might be possible from that approach.
And I just thought of this, so I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, please.
It was just, when you're seeking to have a moment with somebody where you know that something positive, and when we say a moment, it's just a fancy way or a cute way of saying that there was some type of connection, there was some type of understanding. And now the person is a little bit more set on the path that they want to be set on because of it. And if you truly believe based upon, well, okay, so say you start doing this. So you adopt the single session approach, functional contextualist approach, the moment approach, and you start doing this work. And you're like, oh my gosh, like it's great. Like I'd say even for myself, like, I don't know, it was a big transition way back when we went to this. But now, like I've had 9-minute visits, I've had 14-minute visits, I've had 26-minute visits, I've had 48-minute visits where a moment was produced. And they're like, oh my gosh, this was so helpful. And sometimes I didn't even think it was necessarily like that helpful. But now that I know that that's a reality, I am so much more motivated to not miss any handoff, anything that comes through, because I don't want to miss an opportunity for somebody to say, you know what? I never thought about it that way. This was so helpful. Or something even less big than that, smaller than that, where they were so freaked out, a patient was so freaked out about seeing a licensed mental health person. And I came in the room, did my little intro, we got a few questions answered to the contextual interview, and the patient goes, you know, I really think I know what I need to do. You know what? Thank you so much. This was so helpful. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't really even do much. I just like kind of reflected a few things back, and they came up with their own plan. And then they said, you know, this is really helpful. I'll let you know if I need something else. Now they're not freaked out about BHC anymore, or licensed mental health. Oh, I just hit my microphone. And so now they're more flexible with visits. So I have, to this day, patients that like, especially we've been in the same place for 9 years, they just come in for a little tune-up visit here, a tune-up visit there. And so now, think about how motivated I am when handoffs come through. Even if I only have 9 minutes to see that patient for whatever reason, I'm going to go do it.
Think about how motivated every single person that was probably involved in that visit are. As you as a BHC, it's like, oh man, I'm absolutely motivated to have this moment with the patient. Patients now are more motivated, and maybe they're telling their family and their friends. We talk about the R part of gather, about being routine. That makes behavioral health interventions routine because it's like, hey, this was helpful. Then think about the PCP. When that patient comes back in or talks to that PCP and it's like, that visit with Dr. Beachy was so helpful, that was such a great visit, that PCP is going to be like, oh, okay. Every single other person that I have that was dealing with the similar thing, that's going to ripple out.
They can even use that as an example. They could say, you know what, I had another patient who was super freaked out, understandably, for whatever reason about seeing one of our BHCs, but I had my other patient see them, and they were just so, they felt that it was like so normal and so non-judgmental, and they got something out of it. I really think that you could, if you could just give it a try.
The confidence that comes from that it's not something that someone's selling that they never experienced before and they're just trying to make shit up, essentially, right? Now they're saying it with more confidence, that it's like this person actually believes them. And it goes back to something that you always say, and I think this is part of this conversation about increasing productivity that's a higher level. It's like, do good clinical work. And for us, doing good clinical work is focusing on moments in a functional contextualist perspective. That ripples out in really profound clinical ways. The other thing that my mind goes to, and this starts to maybe get a little bit more down into pragmatic kind of tips.
Can I just say really quick about, as far as the good clinical work, nobody get too freaked out. There's a great video that's on one of our playlists that Kirk Strassel did, where he said that he spent his entire career thinking that he needed to be a fancy, you know,
needed to be brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's what he would always say. I used to think I needed to be brilliant, but really what it came down to is I really just need to connect with the person based upon understanding their context and help them do one thing in their life different that they weren't doing prior. And it could be like the smallest little adjustment, just one other behavior just to increase the behavioral repertoire. He's like, if you spend time with somebody and they walk away and they do one little tiny thing different, he's like, that is a very successful
and we won't get into all like how that little behavior, that one small behavior might be like literally all the ACT hexaflex or the FACT pills rolled up into one thing. But the metaphor that we often use, it's not a but and the metaphor we often use for that, it's like a ship moving their direction 1 foot. 1 degree. 1 degree, and then by the time it's miles now different as far as where they're ending up with.
So you were going to the practical.
And this is something that you always promote, and I think you always have done a good job with this. And we talked about this in other videos. See the patient now. If we're really focusing on trying to increase productivity and conjuring up visits, the main thing is see them now. Now that means a lot of different things. Now the one thing that my mind goes to, I love to know where your mind goes with that, is the bird in the hand rule. That if there's a patient that is here that needs to be seen, and even if you have a visit that's coming up in 10 minutes, but that person isn't even checked in, and I would even say, even if that person is checked in at that time, see that patient that is there now, requesting a visit, the same day approach, see that person now.
And if somebody comes early to their appointment, and I don't have somebody, I see that, like...
See them now.
That's the way I think, now I'm going to quote you, what do you do when you're getting like completely inundated with handoffs and different situations? You stay calm and you see them and then you get them all. So you just one after the next, and you take that approach like, I'm going to do this visit and I'm going to do that visit. And going in order based upon, again, you have a 3 o'clock patient who's here, they check in at 2:39 for whatever reason, and you don't have anybody at 2:39, don't wait.
Right.
Don't work on notes.
Go.
Don't do anything other than go get that patient. And then maybe there's a handoff that comes. So anyway, other tangible behaviors such as, I know we've said before, that bumpability, so sitting in the pods, having your space where you see patients be in the same vicinity as the medical providers, having all the same systems and processes with regards to the electronic health record.
I would, and within that, right, and one of the things that often is overlooked is like being very, very like auditing regularly how your handoff process is occurring. Is it cumbersome? Is there a lot of steps for failure or error within that? Because to increase productivity and volume, if you have a very, very seamless, it makes sense, intuitive, warm handoff process, your productivity is going to go up.
You really can't have more than 2 steps.
For the handoff process.
For the handoff
100%.
process. It really needs for each person involved.
Correct.
There can't be more than 2 steps.
And you got to think about that, especially as we've done videos about this before. Like, you also have to think about, like, who am I putting more work on to this person? If I'm putting more work onto someone that is like the beholder of giving the handoff, I don't know if that person's going to give handoffs, and that's going to increase productivity. So I think that's a good one. So other ones that you were saying, so bumpability sitting within the medical pods, logistic kind of things, making sure that the handoff process is seamless and error-free, or as much as possible, the variance is reduced for error.
I have another one.
Yeah.
Tracking. So the process of self-monitoring. We all remember, myself included, the days that I have 14, but I forget about the days that I have 6. We remember when we had 10 or 11, we forget when we had 7. And so mathematically, you're always going to be probably a little bit lower than what you think you are. And when I started doing the self-monitoring, as many days as I'll have, like 12 patients, I don't always average 6, we do everything in half days. I don't always average 6 patients a clinic. Sometimes it's 5.5. But I keep remembering the 12. I'm like, well, I had 6 and 6, 6 and 6, 6 and 6. But you're forgetting the day that you blocked yourself for warm handoffs for whatever reason. Now you only saw, 2 people or something.
Changing any behavior or trying to improve any behavior or, again, modify it. We know self-monitoring is one of the best things to do. And we talked about this regularly, not to go off on a tangent, but just like one of our biggest pet peeves is anytime that we go to a conference or a presentation and someone says, well, I think I average this many, it's like, I don't care. Like again, grace, love, and compassion. What is the actual number?
What is the actual number? And that might be in the beginning, again, back to our other topic we were talking about, if you don't have the infrastructure. So this might be straight up hand counting on an Excel or pen and paper. And in the meantime, you could talk to your supervisor about them creating and running a report.
Correct.
So there's other things that you can do while you're waiting.
two other things my mind goes to. One pragmatic, the other one more kind of higher level. The first one more pragmatic, say yes. Even if you're not 100% sure about what the presenting concern is or how to intervene. And I know that can bring up some unease within our field because we're always like, hey, if I don't have the training on it, I'm not going to see that person. Things come into primary care every single day that PCPs haven't seen before. And that's why they use point of care resources like Up to Date, like in the moment that they're going to be like, I'm going to go to Up to Date and look this up right now. So really making sure, what was so interesting over the weekend, I had that bout with hiccups and stuff, and we looked up to date, and it was like, how many behavioral things were there for hiccups?
There
was a lot. I had no idea, and that was just a fun moment. But that was another reminder to always be like, if someone gets you a handoff or something, and you're like, oh, I don't know how to work with that, still take it, still say yes, still take a contextual approach, and use Up to Date to kind of understand what is going on and to be able to apply a behavioral approach.
And what I always say, I do always say this, always say what you can do, not what you can't do. And if you're in a visit, like you're saying, you can get something done. And if you get trained in the contextual interview, at the very least you can do that. And then you ascertain what the difficulty is. Maybe it's a condition you're not overly familiar with. Well, that doesn't mean that your whole visit was a waste because you've done that contextual interview. There's probably something else that you could work on. And then you straight up tell the patient, based on this, I think that we can definitely get started with X and Y. For Z, I'm going to have to look that up. That'll be perfect. I will research it between now and when I see you back in 2-3 weeks, or when you come back to see your PCP in a month, will you meet with me?
I might send you some stuff after this,
Yeah, there's so many different things you can do. So you can always get something done. Remember what you know. You know a lot more than what you think you do. You can always get something done. And exactly, if you're not completely familiar, then go, look it up, and always say what you can do, not what you can't do with regards to PCPs. If they get you for something and you say, oh, well, no, I can't help with that. And I've seen that happen a lot. And it's totally understandable. I probably did it myself. Who even knows? But there's something, if you can get into the room, there's always something you can get done. People's lives are very complex. So just because you're not an expert on high blood pressure yet, doesn't mean that you can't go in and talk about stress, because guess what? Stress helps with blood pressure.
Boom. Helping someone quit smoking, guess what? Helps with high blood pressure.
Yeah, so you might have to fall it down a little bit until you kind of, it's a big learning curve in working in medical clinic.
Another pragmatic behavior before a large overarching one. What's your behavior in the pods? So when we talk about like scrubbing and huddling, I think that's a common one that everybody said. So scrubbing, scrubbing, PCP schedules when they are coming in, like what patients are coming in, looking at them at the beginning of the morning and the afternoon part of the clinics, going around and talking to them, aka huddling with the patients. I think that's really great. Oftentimes, I think those are the two that people understand a little bit more, and it's a common kind of vernacular that we use. Oftentimes, though, we don't talk about like, what is your behavior actually in the pods? You always do a great job of what don't you do when you're in the pod?
90% of the time, maybe more, I do not sit.
You do not sit. And why don't you sit?
Because I think it makes me look more ready. It makes me look more available. It also is a reminder that when I'm in clinic, really the only thing I should be doing is seeing patients. I know, you don't have to, you could take this section with a grain of salt, but I really don't look at it as I'm here to do notes. I'm here to do anything other than see patients. So it's a stimulus control for my brain and my body. That's what I'm here for. And I'm not perfect at this, by the way.
I have seen, though, when I come into those pods, when you're there and you're standing, it feels like, one, you're part of the team, and like you said, like you're ready to go. Like it's even like a more relaxing versus someone that maybe it's off in the corner. And this is why it's interesting. Like just indiscriminately being in medical pods probably doesn't ripple out completely the way that we think. Your behavior has to match that you're conversating, you're open, you're don't look like you're busy. If you're just elbows deep into the computer, just typing away, working on notes and stuff, someone's going to come up and maybe not want to bother you. And say someone comes up and they say you have a hand up, you're like, oh, I guess. That isn't going to ripple out to getting more handoffs.
And the PCPs, they don't want to lose their BHC, so they end up protecting them. And yeah, exactly, because they don't want to stress them out.
I was just consulting, recently, and there was a meeting where one of the PCPs spoke up about that. It's like, I'm really worried about the BHCs burnout, and which is great. That's I don't want to make light of that. I think that's a really important thing. The one thing my mind heard, though, it's like, that means that like they're not going to use the BHC as much, because it's like,
because they want to protect them.
They want to protect. Last one.
Yeah, is this a high level one?
High level one. Truly believing And it's tough because I don't think you can convince yourself this. This is done through experience, reading, and understanding. Truly believing the interventions that you are giving are life-saving. When we really believe that what I'm doing with the visit, those moments with the patient, when I truly understand the rippling out effect and how life-saving, I just had one of our interns, because we say this a lot during orientation, about how much their visits are life-saving to our community. The intern at the end of the first week said, I get this now more. I get why this is such a life-saving kind of thing. When we understand that, we want to see more patients. Like, if I have a life-saving intervention that I can give to someone, I'm not going to not give it to people. I'm not going to be out in a corner or somewhere holding on to, I always love the metaphor that you've used of the vaccine. Like, I'm not going to hold on to my 12 doses in my vial over here. I'm going to try to pass those out as much as I can because I know how life-saving they are. So there's a bigger topic to that. It's like how, and I think we actually did a PCBH Corner probably on that, understanding how life-saving our work is. Truly, truly embracing that idea that our work is life-saving.
And I don't want anybody to like misunderstand that and say like, so you're saying that if I'm tired, if you're saying that like there's sometimes I don't want to see patients, that means that I'm not doing, that I don't believe in my work. We don't want to take it that way.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, we're not trying to take it that way. It's more just like, I always say it's like going to the gym. Nobody feels like going to the, most of the time, well, maybe there's some people who do. I'll just speak for myself. A lot of times I don't feel like going to the gym, but I know that I need to, and I know that it's good for me. And then I'm always happy that I did it. So again, nobody panic if you don't feel like, oh, I can't wait to see 12 patients all the time. It's human to be like, oh man, like I'm tired. But I'll say this, I've never taken a visit and I thought to myself,
never.
Oh, I really wish I wouldn't have taken that visit. And I'm not in a situation where I didn't think that it was helpful. So in the sense of like, I'll just leave it at that. But the point is that I look at it the same way, that even if I don't always feel motivated with a capital M of like, oh, yippee, although it is important not to go, oh, when you have to take a visit.
Right.
I've done that before and I've apologized because, it's like 4:55 on a Friday.
Oh, no.
And it's like, oh, and then I'm like, what, I apologize. And then I have that visit. And afterwards, it's just like going to the gym. It's like, I am so glad that I did that, and that was so necessary, and that was great. I'm glad that happened. So, anyways, it is a big topic. It's funny. We start off with these hey, just tell BHCs out there the strategy. But the point is, some of these behaviors, as you were saying, doing them indiscriminately, and just being like, okay, well, if I just do this recipe, if I just do this algorithm and these behaviors, that automatically is going to mean that I'm a successful BHC. I've found over the last 10 years of doing this work, it's not that simple.
Dang right.
Having a theoretical, a philosophical approach and getting right in your own mind about how you're going to go about doing things has a lot of fuel, and that with the behaviors that you're doing really makes a well-oiled machine and gives you that energy to keep going.
Love it. As always, thanks for stopping by. Let us know where your mind goes. Questions, thoughts, rumble back with us about different things. But
we just keep getting more and more provocative.
I love it. It's the important conversations that we need to have. So again, thanks for stopping by.